I got a sheet up there for you, sitting on the podium. And also 2 bottles of water for you.
Ooh, a big old water.
As soon as you mentioned the water, you know.
Morning.
Poor dude.
What are you guys doing today?
Sleepy.
I don't know about this chief stuff though, that's probably gonna go.
It was awesome when when the Chiefs played the Packers. She had a bet with mom, she had to show up wearing all Packers gear next day. It was
Is your mom a Packers fan? And a Jets fan, so she's an Aaron Rodgers fan. Yeah. Sounds like your mom's a very smart lady. That was great. My name is Sergeant Todd Garrison. I work for the Department of Corrections here in the state. First thing I'm gonna ask you guys is, when you think of prison, or a prison, what do you think of?
Bars.
Bars,
Unhappy people.
unhappy people.
Terrible food.
Orange.
Okay, terrible food. We can talk about that later. What else? What do you think about it? When you
You got your
say,
signal color orange.
what's that? Color orange, right? Okay.
Black and
My
white
stepmom.
stripes.
Okay. What's that?
Stepmom, because she worked at
Who's that? Your mom?
stepmom,
Your stepmom? Works where?
Fort Madison prison,
Okay. Who's your stepmom?
Samantha,
Samantha what?
Ra.
Okay. What else? Think of any movies? I know Mr. Carpenter knows a song. That's always my first choice. Who sang that song, by the way? Anyone know that? Who sang that song? That you heard Liz coming in?
Johnny Cash.
Nice. Good. What else do you think of when you think of the word prison? What about a movie? Think of movies?
I think of song, also Prison Blues.
Okay. Or a show.
Prison break.
911.
Prison Break, 911. Okay. So let me ask you guys this. What's the difference between prison and jail? Or is there a difference?
Jail is a
One
lot
has
more
nicer stuff.
strict and unfun, while prison actually has like privileges and stuff like that.
Okay. That's an interesting take.
They have different privileges.
We just had somebody from One County Jail yesterday.
Sure. Okay, so what is did he talk about the difference between jail and prison? Did he talk about prison at all?
Not much.
Probably not, right?
For like 2 minutes.
So what's the difference between jail and prison? The difference is that when somebody gets arrested, jail is a holding place for them, either while they await trial, or they have to be there until, it's a non-convicted arrest. So they're arrested, they get put in jail, they stay there until they either post bond or trial, one of the two, depending on what it goes. And then once they get convicted of a crime, they go through jury, go through that process, or a judge just imposes a sentence. Then the long-term holding place is a prison. So that's the difference. Make sense?
Yeah.
Between jail and prison. Some people think, hey, I could go to jail. That's the difference. Jail is a temporary holding place, where prison is a long-term facility. In the state of Iowa, there's 9 state prisons throughout the entire state. There's roughly between 9 and 10,000 people are incarcerated for long-term inside the state of Iowa. So you can roughly average that out, roughly 1,000 people per prison. The prison system in the state of Iowa, if you think about the prison system throughout the country, you think of someone said Iowa State Penitentiary. The actual, when you think about the word penitentiary, does anybody know what that means? Every prison is really penitentiary, it's just a label. What's the word penitentiary mean? Anybody know or think about it? The first penitentiary was actually a place called Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. If you ever find yourself out east in Philadelphia, my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, lived a block away from Eastern State Penitentiary when we were dating, so I was able to take an awesome tour through that place. It's been shut down for years, but during Halloween, they turned into a huge haunted house, which is pretty awesome. Which I wish that's what they would do. That's what they should do with the old Iowa State Penitentiary in Madison.
Oh, I can get my hands on that.
Oh my gosh, I'm telling you what. I've told everyone that's what you need to do. But, anyway, the word penitentiary actually comes from the word penitent, being penitent. Who knows what that means? It means being sorry. So it's a holding place, morning. It's a holding place for you to go when you think about what you've done. It's really kind of what that belongs to. In the Department of Corrections, throughout the country, also in the state of Iowa, the main idea are two things. It's a twofold mission. Number one is to keep dangerous individuals off the street and away from general public. That's number one for security. Number two then is providing the ability for rehabilitation.
Yep.
And so once they go into prison, one, they're kept away from general public, and two, they are provided an opportunity of change. That's really the twofold mission of the Department of Corrections. The way they provide change is they take classes, they go through classes to help whatever certain charge they've had. They have to take certain classes that corresponds with that charge, and that is, they cannot get out of that. That is imposed by the judge, so they have to go through that in order to discharge. Something interesting in the Department of Corrections, good or bad, it's up to you what you think of that. But what most people think of is when they get a charge and they're convicted of that charge, depending on the seriousness of that charge, typically what happens is if you get a 10-year charge or 10-year sentence, that sentence is automatically cut in half in the state of Iowa. So if you get a 10-year sentence, it automatically gets cut in half to a 5-year sentence. And of that 5-year sentence, it gets cut in half again of how much actual time you have to serve inside prison. That is different from federal prison, which you get a 10-year charge or 10-year sentence in federal prison, you actually have to serve 10 years inside federal prison.
Actually, they got down to 80% now.
Is it 80%? I'm sure they're gonna go that way. So, the reason for that, why do you think they would do that? If you get a 10-year sentence and they cut it in half twice, why do you think they do that? You know?
Easier on you?
I'll try to be easier on you. They do that because they want you to change. They're giving you every opportunity to change your life. That's why. For the Department of Corrections, in order to get employed there, the only thing you really need is a high school diploma. If you want to move up in the Department of Corrections, you need more than a high school diploma. You need a degree, at least a associate's degree or bachelor's degree, master's, and so on. You can move up to administration. So it's not, when you think about being employed for the state of Iowa, it's not just being a corrections officer. There's many aspects inside prison. In order for prison to run, it has to be maintained in many different facets, from maintenance to dietary. We already talked about correctional counselors, which actually help facilitate change. And then the security side of it, which is what I do. I started as a correctional officer, and then I promoted to sergeant. So what my specific job duties are in Mount Pleasant is every single new guy that comes in to prison, I run them through an orientation. So I'm the face they see when they come in. I explain what the basic rules are, what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do, and then I send them on to their assigned unit. And then I also take care of property. So anything that they buy or own inside the prison, I am in charge of. I'm very strict on property. They can only have certain things, and there's limits to everything they can have, and I am extremely strict on those limits. The reason why I'm so strict on those limits is because it's an exchange process. So there's no money inside prison. So what they have to do is they have to use food or commissary as money for exchanges. And that is absolutely not allowed. In some other prisons in the state of Iowa, they're not so strict. I am extremely strict with that. The reason for that is because of PREA. Does anybody know what PREA is? PREA is a federal legislation called the Prison Rape Elimination Act. It was enacted by President Bush in the early 2000s. And basically what that says is that people inside prison can't have any sexual relations at all. And part of bartering money or asking for things, so for instance, if you have a sandwich and say, hey, let me have your sandwich, you go like, yeah, sure, no problem. Now you owe someone if they get a sandwich from you, and that owing someone puts you in a very bad situation in prison. So getting into debt is not a good idea, so that is why I'm so hard on property. The other thing that I do is that when they're about to leave, they get a parole or discharge, or a work release is what it's called. I am also the guy that they see when they're leaving. So that's my main job duties. My other job duties that I do is I'm part of the CERT team in Mount Pleasant. If you've ever heard of a SWAT team, a CERT team is a SWAT team inside the prison. So in other words, if someone is inside a facility and they're starting to act up and they're not doing what they need to do, the CERT team gets called in to take care of the situation. Typically what that means is that if they're not in isolation, they're put into isolation. And if they act up inside isolation, then they need to be 4-pointed. If they act up while they're 4-pointed, they're 5-pointed. And if they're act up when they're 5-pointed, they're 6-pointed. And they usually get drugs after that. If you don't know what 4-pointed is, what do you think being 4-pointed is? Anybody know? 4-pointed is where you're strapped to a table with your two wrists and two ankles are strapped to the table. 5-pointed is another strap across the chest. 6-pointed is a strap across the face.
So it's 6 points of contact.
Yep, exactly right.
That does not sound fun.
Not fun. The interesting thing about that, guys, and this is kind of the thrust that Mr. Carper was talking about, is really when you talk about the prison system, I really am on the front lines because I get to talk to you. I talk to these guys every day. And there's one thing in particular that I give to them is some advice about their lives. Because again, the idea with the Department of Corrections that it's the Department of Corrections. So we're giving them an opportunity to correct themselves. And who can do that? Who can correct yourself? Can I correct you?
You can help us on the path.
I can guide it. You're exactly right. And that's really what our job is what my job is. But who can ultimately make that change?
Only you.
Only you. Which is interesting because of all the people that are incarcerated, how many do you think get out?
Not a lot.
How many do you think? Percentage-wise? I'm a numbers guy. How many do you think?
Like 5%.
5% get out?
I'd say more about like 17, 18.
Anyone else? 97% of everyone that becomes incarcerated in their life
That
get
says
out.
a lot about society.
In other words, there's 90% of people do not get life sentences. That's what that means. So they get charged with a 5-year sentence or 10-year sentence, or maybe 15 or a 30 or 20 or something like that. So eventually, most people get out of prison. What's that? What do you think? Is that a good or a bad thing? It's good for them. She said it's good for them. Why is it good for them?
It depends if they learned
Because they
their
were
lesson or not.
rehabilitated.
So of those 97% that get out, how many do you think come back?
Like 50.
What's that?
Like 50%.
50%? Okay,
30
anyone
through
else?
40%.
What'd you say, 30?
Through 40%.
Like 87%, somewhere around.
2/3 come back.
Yeah.
So you're close.
So about 67-ish percent
Of course.
of all those that are incarcerated get out, end up going back into prison. But here's an interesting statistic. I actually just looked this up not just long ago, because I noticed this myself. I noticed that with the guys that serve a lot of time, I'm talking about like 15 plus years and actually serve 15 plus years straight, those guys who get out after serving 15 years, the vast majority of them never come back. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
So the
So you
longer they
think
spend
made it
and the
so that
less
if
they're
you
gonna
got
like to
10
come
years,
back.
you had to serve all 10 years, that'd probably drop your citizen.
If you're asking me as a private citizen, the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. It's cutting in half thing again.
That's
It doesn't
exactly
work.
what the jail staff said yesterday too.
It doesn't work. It never has, it just doesn't work. There was a guy, when I first started, he was on his 18th year. He got out. I just saw him at Walmart about 2 weeks ago. He got off paper completely, and he's doing phenomenal. Really, really good. I shook his hand. I was like, proud of you, man. You did great. And he had a violent crime. So if you serve 18 years straight in prison, you did something pretty violent. Usually an armed robbery, something like that, we have to serve 85% of that. So he was sentenced to 20 years, and you had to serve at least 85% of that 20 years for armed robbery. So if you go rob someone and you bring a weapon into that equation, that usually gives you an 85% kicker. Makes sense? So yeah, if the longer they serve actually serve time, the more rehabilitated they become, and that is by far the norm. But not only that, so I have a worker that works with me, and he is serving a life sentence for first-degree murder. He's been in prison for 35 years, and he is one of the nicest guys you've ever talked to. Why? What do you think that is? What's that? That's an interesting perspective. I would agree with you for that. That doesn't always happen, right? Let me make that distinction. There are some people that are incarcerated that are absolutely psychopaths, and they commit a horrible crime like that, and there's really nothing there. There's another way to describe it. I was in Fort Madison prison during it. There was an altercation going on, so we were called down to Fort Madison. So I get called throughout the state because I'm on the CERT team. So if there's an issue going on, we go throughout the state.
I know what it stands for.
And but CERT, what does it stand for?
Community Emergency Response Team.
Nope. That's an outside CERT.
Oh.
Inside corrections.
Yeah.
Emergency response. Yep. Just a fun little story. I guess it's not very fun, but it's kind of a fun little story. So I was inside Fort Madison prison. I was walking by a prison cell, and I got that feeling. You ever been somewhere or around someone or been in a place and you just felt off? You ever felt that before? Guys, you say all the time? Well, then all the time. Guys, pay attention to that. That's a very real thing. We call it spidey sense, whatever you want to call it.
It's called intuition.
The intuition for 100%. Guys, pay attention to that. I've been in corrections for 15 years. I'm here to tell you that is absolutely, there's something to that. Don't discount that. If you're around someone, or you're around somewhere, say you're at you're in a situation and you feel off, I'm here to tell you.
There's a reason for it.
There is a reason for it. Listen to it, wherever that is, wherever that comes from, listen to it, and please make an adjustment.
Sometimes I see things happening too. I have like visions. It's scary.
Pay attention to them, right? So I was in this facility, and they're on lockdown, which means when you think of most people in prison, you think of someone who's inside of a cell, and the cell door shuts, and they're locked in there for most of their life, right? That is not what prison is. Most of the time, these people can roam around. In other words, their prison cell is open. They can walk around either in the pod that they're in, or they can even go to the yard. And they can walk pretty much freely inside that facility. That is one main thing that when I noticed walking for the first time, I noticed that, oh, everyone's walking around. This is not what I thought. Thought of someone with the bar door shut. Eventually that does happen, but at night. So they're locked inside their cell at night only. Or, like I said, if they get in trouble, like if they get into a fight or whatever,
They go to timeout time.
They go to, it's called segregation. And segregation is either called administrative segregation or ADSEG, which means that they are put in there under investigation. They go into a situation where it's called PC or protective custody. In other words, they check themselves in, either for mental issues or they feel they're in danger. Or the last one's called DD or disciplinary detention, when they have broken a rule and they're put in there by an administrative law judge as a sanction. And that, when they're in segregation, they are locked in that, inside that room for 24/7, every day, except for 3 hours a week. In those 3 hours a week, they're allowed to shower and exercise. So imagine that, being inside a very small cell, 24/7. Probably not too fun.
Can you give them an idea how big that cell would be?
Let's say you cut this table off to the wall, right here. Typically, maybe actually cut that in half.
Someone with claustrophobia would
So.
never be able to do that.
Yeah, they have to anyway. If they have claustrophobia and they start acting up, we will probably give them medication. That's not, they have no option. The thing is, guys, when you create a crime, this is what I'm going through my little life lesson here that we're talking about. If you commit a crime on the outside, you lose, and you get convicted of that crime, and you end up inside prison or a holding cell, you lose rights, right? The only rights you have are constitutional rights. That's the only rights that are left. So if you find yourself inside of a facility, you lose rights. You lose your rights, a lot of rights. In other words, I can walk to my facility right now, I can take someone and I can do a full strip search. We have to have access to that. We have access to all of their belongings. I can go into their cell. I can look through everything they own at any time. And if they can't do that, they can't handle that, or they go against that, they try to fight us, then that's when they get put in segregation. So it's not a good situation, guys. But here's the thing, and I'm gonna express to you guys. By the way, what grades are you guys?
Sophomore,
Sophomore.
Yeah, I'm a junior.
senior.
So everyone,
You don't count.
so for freshmen to senior. Who are my seniors?
Apparently, yeah,
Just one? Two? Juniors? Junior. Sophomores? And freshmen. Okay, great. So occasionally, when I'm dealing with these guys, there are a few that start to get it. In other words, they put themselves in a situation, obviously they put themselves in prison. They're in prison for whatever they've done, and they end up, they made horrible choices in their life, right? And ultimately, who's responsible for those horrible choices?
Yeah.
Who do you think they blame it on?
Someone else.
Everyone else, from society to their parents to their siblings to what happened to them when they were younger. They blame it on literally everyone else. So the moment that they start to change, guys, is when they realize that it is not about anyone else except them. What that does is that they start to take their power back. When they realize that they can make a change in their life, they become empowered. Once I start to see that change a little bit, I'm in kind of an interesting situation in my office where these guys come in and they have to exchange property when they're about to go home. Especially when they're about to go home, I give a little speech to a guy. And this is, again, I do this, I'm very choosy whoever the speech I give this to. And so, I think I did this last time with Mr. Carper's class, so I'm gonna do it to you guys. And this speech, it only works on people that tend to get it, tend to get life, tend to make good decisions. And I think everyone in here is doing that. So I'm gonna give that to you guys. Now, I'm gonna give this speech to you guys. It's just a small one. It's not really a speech, it's more of advice. And this comes with a disclaimer. Once you have this knowledge, you can't unknowledge it. You can't forget it. Do you guys want to hear it? Here it is. I want you to think about everything in the universe. How big is the universe? What's that?
It's expensive.
It's expansive.
It's constantly growing.
Constantly growing. How many things are in the universe?
Too many.
A lot, isn't there? More so than you can possibly even think of, correct?
Actually, technically not. If the universe is constantly expanding, then separated point being less and less.
There's a lot of stuff though, correct? Is there a lot of stuff? Yeah? Of all the things in the universe, think of all the planets, the stars, everything. There's only two types of things in the entire universe. There's agents to act and objects to be acted upon. I'll say it again. There's either agents to act or objects to be acted upon. So if you think about a planet, think about the sun, you think about a pencil, you think about the cup, what are those things? Are those things agents to act for themselves, or are they objects?
Objects.
They're objects, right? I can take this pen, I can move this pen around, wave it in the air, do all those things. Why? Because it is a what? What am I? Am I an object or am I an agent? That's exactly right, because I can move those things, right? I can make decisions to move those things. Out of all the things in the universe, how many of those things are objects?
Most of it.
About 99.9999999, I don't know how many nines percent of things in the universe are objects.
We're just letting
Which means what? What does that say about you? You're not only unique, you're almost statistically impossible. Think about that one. And of all those things that of the universe, you being an agent, you can either use it or misuse it, that agency. As soon as you misuse your agency, you allow yourself to become an object. In other words, if someone breaks a law, commit a crime, right? Now they are subject to the legal system and the justice system. Do they have any say in that? Do they have any say in those consequences after it's happened? They have no say, do they? So as soon as they misuse that agency, they allow themselves to become an object for the system. Isn't that interesting? The kicker with this whole story, guys, is that at any time you can make that switch of allowing yourself either to become an object or an agent. If you decided to try a drug, whether it's heroin or cocaine or you name it, if you decide to take a drug, are you being an agent or are you being an object? Why? It's illegal and it's addictive on top of it, is it not? Right? If you're addicted to something, aren't you allowing yourself to become an object? Make sense, guys? You guys see where I'm going with it?
Yeah, my stepmom has a lot of brothers that did drugs, got addicted, got put in jail and prison. And then they chased it around. And one of them did it again, almost died, and now he realizes that he's dead. And they gave him probation. And
Yep. Yeah, guys, and that's all what prison does, is it allows themselves to, it gives them time to make that switch. Okay, I'm not an object anymore. I don't want to be an object anymore. I want to be an agent and use my agency. The reason why I'm telling this to you guys is because all of you guys have agency. Some of you already had, I'm just reminding you what you have. And so when you make good decisions in your life and in society, you actually give yourself more power. Because as soon as you misuse that agency, your power leaves. And you give your power either to the system going to someone else. Make sense? The kicker I was talking about, guys, is I'm gonna talk about the guy I work with who was in prison for life, because he obviously did a horrible crime years ago. That guy is one of the freest guys I've ever seen. What does that possibly mean? He's one of the freest guys I've ever seen. Okay, he changed. How much can he change? He's inside prison, right? How much can he actually change?
A lot.
A lot. Because what did he change? He changed this. He can't change his circumstances, right? His circumstances are because of what he did. But he changed his mindset, and he is one of the most empowered people I know. He's heavily active in religion inside prison. He's a mentor inside prison. He follows every prison rule to the T. He is every bit of rehabilitated as you can possibly think of. And why? Because he has spent so much time doing the right thing and making good choices. What I'm saying is, guys, that you guys can make that decision right now and not find yourself in a situation where it's you've given up your power. You guys have power right now to make good decisions. I'm gonna finish with that little story that I started here. I was walking inside Iowa State Penitentiary. I was walking by a cell and I got that feeling. I almost felt like light around me was getting darker. I mean, I don't know if it was not, but it sure felt that way. And I heard a voice through a cell door, and the guy was like, "Hey, Sarge," and he just said it normally, but I got chilled. And I've seen a lot with the Department of Corrections, and
You get lightheaded when you pick up on the energy too.
I don't know about that one.
I get
I want to
lightheaded.
run. But I was like, I've seen a lot, and this guy, I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. I've met all kinds of interesting people. This guy, without even looking at him, I was like, this guy is a complete psychopath. I turned and I looked at him, and I looked in his eyes, guys. I'm here to tell you, he had zero soul. I mean, there was just nothing there. And he asked me a question, and inmates can tend to be very manipulative, so I was very cautious, of course, but I talked with him a little bit. When I was done talking to him, I left, and I was like, that guy freaks me out. He is a dangerous individual. So that is a very small percentage, in my opinion, of people incarcerated are that way. Most people have the opportunity to change their lives and make good decisions. Questions or comments?
How did you know that you were asleep?
What's that?
How did you know that you were asleep?
Because of why.
His ranking badge.
Yeah, guys, people incarcerated, they're extremely intuitive to their surroundings, right? Because that's all they have. So it's like, they're like superheroes when it comes to those senses, right? They see things, they hear things, they understand things, they see and hear everything, they know what's going on. You'd be surprised. Once I get information, I guarantee half the prison population already knows it. It's just that's how that works. So when they look at me, they know exactly who I am. They know you get reputations inside the Department of Corrections. I know they already know about my reputation and what that looks like and what that means. If you get into a fight or a tussle with someone, that reputation spreads across the state, so it's pretty interesting. Any other questions?
They do the same on patrol.
What's that? Yeah.
I had one guy that I pulled over, he looks at me and goes, "Oh, you're Carter, he's brand new from Chicago." He goes, "I heard about you."
Yep. Yeah, they know who I am. As soon as they come in, they know exactly who I am and what I'm about and so on. One thing, a piece of information I didn't mention is I'm also a firearms instructor for the state of Iowa. So an Iowa Law Enforcement Academy certified. I'm also an Iowa Law Enforcement Academy certified defensive tactics instructor. So I teach self-defense inside prison. I teach officers, not only police officers and state troopers and so on, but I also teach correctional staff as well, tactical cuffing procedures and self-defense.
Why'd you get into this career?
Why did I get into the career? I always knew I wanted to go into law enforcement, and my brother works for the federal government. Actually, my brother worked for the state of Iowa. He was a state trooper, and then he went on and became worked for the FBI. He's a FBI agent out of Oklahoma City. I wanted to follow his footsteps. I wanted to get into law enforcement. I actually tried out for Burlington Police Department 3 times. They denied me 3 times. Thanks, Brian.
Biggest mistake in the world.
I tried out for the state patrol. The state patrol was, there was 500 applicants when I tried out for the state patrol. I made it through the entire process. They were hiring 2, and I was number 3. So they said, try out again. In that time of trying out again, there's a good friend of mine in probation and parole office. He mentioned I should try corrections. So I went and applied, and I was lucky enough to get hired. And I promoted, and now I'm in a sweet spot now, so.
What's the hiring process?
What's that?
What's the hiring?
The hiring process, you have to go to the Iowa Administrative Services, called Iowa DAS. You have to go through them to start your application process. They do a background check, and then if you pass those background checks and those points, you have to take a psychological exam. Once you pass the psychological exam, then you go in for an interview. Once you pass the interview and you end up getting hired, then you have to pass an academy. So if you make it through all those processes, then you can start your appointment.
How many people are sitting in on the interview?
What's that?
How many people sit in on the interview?
Typically 3. Yep, 3. And that's every law enforcement position that I've interviewed for, it's always been at least 3. Yep.
I know when I interviewed, there was 12.
12.
Yeah, that was intimidating.
Yeah, and that actually does, and that's more than, I know, because when I went out for Burlington PD, I had what was that called, it was like
Civil Service Commission.
Civil Service Commission interview, so I went through that one as well, and then, so. Yeah, so I tried out for Burlington PD 3 times, and Des Moines County Sheriff's Department 3 times.
Why did you get denied?
I have no idea. I'm even bilingual, so I was like, come on guys. I thought I had a pretty good shot.
I thought you did too. I don't understand why that's.
So, I don't know. I don't know.
I know one of the hires was a favoritism hire.
Oh yeah, and there's absolutely those. I don't know how I even got hired at Department of Corrections, I don't know. I only knew one guy there, so, but,
Let me tell you, typically when I'm in a room, I'm one of the more dangerous people. I would never mess with this man. He would mop the floor with me, with the stuff he knows.
anyone else? Any other questions, comments?
How has this affected your family's life?
That's a good question. My wife was here. She would say that probably the most difficult part is just the danger involved, right? The potential for a danger inside the Department of Corrections is, or any law enforcement for that matter, is typically higher. When I'm inside the facility, we can't carry firearms, right? The only time I carry a firearm inside of a facility is that if things go really bad. I'm a licensed armor and firearms instructor, so we can carry, the CERT team can carry into a situation. But typically we use pepper spray or CS gas, things
Are
like.
tasers allowed?
Yep, tasers too. Yep, so this is the pepper spray that's used.
Should we give us like a demonstration?
What's that?
Should I give us a demonstration?
You probably wouldn't want that.
I'll be demonstration.
How about me?
Hey,
Do
you
it,
got
Dave.
covered.
Have you guys anywhere like hot stuff in here, hot food? Yeah? What's the hottest thing you've ever eaten?
I've had habanero hot sauce.
Habanero hot sauce, okay. Anyone else? So a habanero pepper, it's the hotness is measured on what's called Scoville units, right? A habanero, let me know how many Scoville units a habanero has.
Like 7 million.
No, not quite that
No,
much.
no.
It's roughly 600,000 Scoville units. That's what a habanero pepper
I was
is.
thinking of wrong pepper maybe.
A ghost pepper is right around 1 million Scoville units.
I know, I've had ghost pepper out.
If you look on this one, this will tell you how many Scoville units it has. I thought it was on the front, but it's not. Anyway, this can,
But it's not fun.
if you get sprayed, it has 2.5 million Scoville units. So more than double a ghost pepper in your eyeball, which is not fun.
That's the gift that keeps giving too. You wash it off and it comes back.
Yeah, I think, the funny thing with law enforcement, anything used in law enforcement, except for handgun, of course, you have to get used on first, right? So if I have to carry pepper spray, then I have to be pepper sprayed. If I want to use a taser or we don't use a taser, we use what's called a rack belt. So we do a
Does the same go for guns?
what's that?
Does the same go for guns? Do
No.
you have to get shot to use a gun?
No. But a rack belt is we put around their waist and sometimes their chest, and I can do is, and when I escort them, say, to a court or something like that, I can push a button and they get 50,000 volts for 10 seconds. 10 seconds. So in order for us to do that, guess what? I have to take a ride too. So same with pepper spray. In fact, with pepper spray, we have to get an actual Class A exposure, which means I would sit there like this with my eyes open, and then they spray right in my eyes. So I have to actually take a full shot of 2.5 million Scoville units, which is wonderful, by the way. It's amazing.
And the bad thing about pepper spray, if somebody uses it, everybody gets it.
So you get a secondary exposure, right? So if I spray someone, then it fills the room up, depending on what kind of spray it is, it fills the room up, and so I get secondary exposure, which is, still sucks, it's not as bad as a primary exposure, but secondary exposure is not fun either. But we have something now, we have something called OC vapor. So if they're inside of a cell and they're being stupid inside of a cell, what we'll do is what they typically do is they'll cover up like the door with like a mattress or paper or something so we can't spray them. But now we have an OC vapor. Vapor is atomized OC. So in other words, you spray inside the cell and it just permeates everything.
Serious?
Yeah, it's amazing. So we spray that and we'll just let them bake for a little bit. Say, okay, you ready to come out? They usually can't give their hands up after that. Not always, but.
I never been tasered.
Yep.
You just said you
Bro,
can't
listen. I ain't listening. Ask me again. How many times have you been tasered?
A lot.
Is it true that at least like low burn marks because?
It absolutely does.
It does.
It absolutely. I saw the marks. So I'm a trainer. So when I train the new guys that start the CERT team is they also have to go through a pretty rigorous physical test to get on the CERT team. They have to be physically able, and part of that ability is they have to go through the OC and they have to go through CS gas. CS gas is called tear gas. So they go inside a room and they have to breathe that in and then run out. And then they also have to be tasered. And so because I'm an instructor, I get to get tasered a whole bunch. So,
You should be used to it.
what's that?
You should be used to it.
I have been tasered, I don't know how many times, I hate it every single time. I don't get used to it. OC, I don't get used to it either. I hate electronics, I hate way more than actually OC.
I'd take getting tasered any day over OC.
I know, most people are, I'm a weird guy and I hate electronics, man, I can't stand them. I just can't stand them. OC too, OC only works in roughly 95% of the population. There's that 5% out there that you get OC, just nothing happens to them. It's just their genetic makeup. A good friend of mine that happened to be in that 5%, you spray him and he just wipes it off.
That's scary when you wanna get some too.
It is, yeah, it's like you spray him and then nothing happens. So then now all is he not complying with your directives, but now he's full of OC, which means you're gonna be full of OC, it's kind of a mess.
Yes. So what's the requirements to get in CERT team?
You have to go through, there's a written exam, so you have to pass the written exam first. Then there's a physical exam. That physical exam consists of running, you have to run 2 miles in under 18 minutes, which really is a big deal. 2 miles in 18 minutes, then you have to run a quarter mile. You have to sprint a quarter mile and then put on handcuffs and leg irons on a compliant subject in 3 minutes. And then you have to put on a face mask where everything's blacked out. So someone talked about being claustrophobic. Everything's blacked out in a face mask, and you have to go through a system of crawling to a destination while you're masked, where you can't see anything, can't hear anything. Then you have to run 5 flights up and down 5 flights of steps in, I think it's 90 seconds. And then I'm missing something. Oh yeah, dummy drag. You have to drag 150 pound dummy. I forget how many feet or yards. No, it's maybe 50 feet in a certain time frame. I can't remember what time frame it is. And then after that, then that's just to get on. That's just to pass state requirements. And then on Mount Pleasant and also in Fort Madison, we also have extra requirements. So you have to do so many push-ups, so many sit-ups in a minute, so many pull-ups in a minute time. Once you pass all that, then you have to go to the range and you have to be qualified on 3 different types of weapons: a handgun, a pistol, handgun, a rifle, and a shotgun. You have to pass those qualifications. If you can pass all those qualifications, then there's a 40-hour course you have to go through in order to become up to speed. And what you have to do as a cert officer. Once you pass all of that, then you get your uniform, and you get to wear black. So there's a lot to it.
So you're the best of the best, basically.
Best of the best. Yeah, and we weed out everyone else. So if you're not physically able to do that, or even mentally or emotionally able to do the things that you have to do, it's pretty grueling. And by the way, you have to pass that test every year. So you do all that to get on, but then you have to requalify every single year. And I've been on the cert team for 10 years now. So
That's
it's a lot. It's a lot of fun, actually. I love it. It's great.
How often do you get called out?
Actually, out like to another facility, it doesn't happen tons. I would say maybe twice a year. To get recalled to my own facility, it happens maybe once every 2 or 3 months, depending on what it is. Something major happened about 2 years ago in the Department of Corrections. I don't know if everyone knows or heard about it, but there was the state of Iowa became the first on record to have a double homicide inside of a correctional facility, which means 2 staff members were pretty brutally murdered by an inmate. One was a nurse and the other one was a correctional officer. This happened about 2 years ago in Anamosa State Penitentiary. Once that happened, the whole state went on lockdown. All the CERT went there. It was a mess. The other main thing that I can think of is when there was an escape out of Fort Madison prison. It's happened, maybe it's been 7, 8 years ago now. It was a Sunday morning. I was enjoying my Sunday morning and I got a call and said, hey, you get right back. Actually, I take that back. We had a stabbing inside Mount Pleasant, a pretty nasty stabbing I was recalled for just about 2 months ago. Like I said, the prison population right in Mount Pleasant right now, we have about 1,200 inmates. In any given time, typically there's about 21 officers that run 1,000 inmates in prison. And that's not necessarily counting support staff. So I'm not counting that because I'm a sergeant, but roughly 21 to 25 officers that run that, and then 2 or 3 captains, about 5 sergeants who run the prison for about 1,200 inmates. There's a saying in prison. It's called "No guns, just guts." It's exactly what it is, because sometimes that can be. If they really wanted to take it over, you think they could? Think they could? They absolutely could. Really, at any given time. we have secondary measures to stop that. Of course, they would eventually lose, but for a time, they would absolutely win. Yep. That's the only thing really that's stopping them, is one, the ability of their chance of getting out, right? And two, they know that eventually they would lose.
Yes, they would.
Yeah, every time. That's what I talk about. You know, usually when the CERT team does, like when a guy refuses to come out of his cell, the CERT team has to go in there and forcefully take him out, right? What I typically do is, since I'm leader of the CERT team there, I'll go up and start talking to them and say, listen, here's the deal. You know what's gonna happen eventually, right? You're going to lose. It's a matter of how much difficulty you wanna go through before that happens. That's usually what I say to them. And some guys just like to fight for it. That's the truth. Anything else? So there is one women's prison in the state of Iowa, in Mitchellville, Iowa. That is where all the women are held. At one time, Mount Pleasant did have a 100-bed women's unit on campus, but that was several years ago, and I did work there at a time for a time as well. So there's roughly, I think there's about 1,300 women incarcerated in Mitchellville. So that's for the entire state. So roughly 1,300 women incarcerated in the entire state. All the other 8 prisons are men. So vast majority of men. Yeah.
What do you think is the best tool that you have to use as a guard?
Your ability to communicate. You have to be able to communicate with people, and that's in every aspect, but I've got to be able to communicate with people. That's absolutely number one. If you can communicate people effectively and be able to talk with them and then respond back and just communicate as in actual communication. What is actual communication? It's not one-sided where I'm just talking to you and you sit there listening to me, where I actually communicate something to you and you're able to communicate it back and have that good communication back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That is essential. And I would say that, guys, in life in general, get that skill. So put yourself in a situation where you have to use it. You have to be able to communicate. Who likes standing up front giving speeches? Anyone like to do that? So, everyone hates it, right? Push yourselves to do something like that. It's going to help.
I don't hate it, I just get
No,
rid
she
of
must
anxiety
prefer not
during
to.
it.
Sure.
Actually, in this class, I told them what my plan is I have them break into groups, and then eventually we'll be moving up to the front to talk. But we'll do it slowly, so by the time they get up there, they've already talked to everybody.
Beautiful. That's it.
Get used to communicating.
Yeah, that's it, guys. And I mean, follow Mr. Carver, guys, as you do that, because again, he knows how to communicate. He was a police officer for years. Guys, watch people who know how to communicate and emulate them. See what they do.
I'm doing a big section in my advanced class on it.
Perfect. Yeah, wouldn't you say as a police officer, communication was,
Oh, it's key.
it's paramount.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Going to CIT, I thought I was good until I went to CIT school, and that really made
There
me
you
a
go.
whole lot better at that.
It's public safety, guys. I mean, you're talking about public safety and being a public servant, which is what I am. Who am I serving? I'm serving you guys. I'm serving the community, right? That's what I'm trying to do. So I have to be able to communicate effectively with everyone. To be a good public servant, an effective public servant. Can I go to my job and just kind of just do the minimal line of my job and just not communicate with anyone? I sure could, but I'm just not that guy. I have to be involved. I have to try and make.
And if you do that, you fail everybody.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep.
You fail the reason why you're a prisoner.
Yep. Yep. So knowing that, who wants to work for the Department of Corrections? Like, maybe not so much. Believe me, I never thought I was gonna be here as well. Like I said, I always thought I was gonna be a police officer or a federal agent, or actually U.S. Marshal is what I really wanted to do. But I love corrections, and now I'm in it for a long haul, man. Got roughly 10 years left.
Let me tell you, the other side's nice.
Yeah, I know, believe me. Oh, I know exactly what I'm gonna be doing once I retire. It was 10
So-
years ago, go by quick.
Yeah, so you said you're bilingual. What's the other language you speak?
I lived in Brazil for about 3 years. What do Brazilians speak? Anybody know? What do they speak in Brazil? Anyone? What do they speak in Brazil? What do they speak in Mexico?
Spanish.
What do they speak in Bolivia? Argentina.
Yeah.
It's all South America, right? Brazil's in South America. What do they speak in Paraguay? Spanish. Uruguay? Spanish.
Espanol.
So Central South America, pretty much what they speak, except for one country. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese.
Come on, just say it louder.
So I speak Portuguese, which is pretty close to Spanish, but.
I was telling these guys how each of them also has their own little dialect, and I almost arrested a guy from Argentina because he was speaking Spanish to me. Well, I thought it was Spanish
Right.
because some of the words were the same. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this guy's playing a game for me.
Yeah.
So I about hooked him until his friend explained it. I'm like, okay, that explains it. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, they're all Latin languages, so I'm a big language fan. I like learning languages anyway. So I know a little French, a little Italian, and Portuguese is, like I said, I've lived there for 3 years. My wife is Brazilian, so all we speak at home is Portuguese, so all of our kids. In fact, we were just in Brazil over Christmas, visiting our family, so it's good too.
Very cool.
On a beach, it was horrible.
I saw the pictures. I felt so bad.
Yeah. Pretty amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was amazing. Yep.
So what's some of the jobs you had before you were a correctional officer?
I worked in the restaurant business. Well, I was a paper boy. I worked in the restaurant business. I worked at Martini's Grill for a long time. Was a server there. Worked at a video store. You guys probably know what that is. Worked at a video store.
Video warehouse.
Video warehouse. Where I would people come in and rent VHS tape. You guys know what a VHS tape is? They don't.
Box office.
DVDs. Yep.
Yeah.
You just dated me, Brian, big time.
But you know what? All those jobs probably help you in communication.
It did. Yep.
Especially the servers.
Yeah, and that's what I tell my son. My son's was like, you gotta communicate.
You need that?
All right, guys. Let's give it up. Very knowledgeable.